So we're here. We are in the regulatory phase of artificial intelligence in the Gutenberg timeline. I think we probably hit this way faster than the internet or like the printing press, anything, because it can definitely do more harm than good. If you listen to my last episode, we were talking about the IBM patent about trustworthiness. And at first glance, I was like, kind of odd, to have to utilize something like this. But I mean, this 523 to 46 vote with 49 abstentions in the European Parliament to pass the Artificial Intelligence Act. I think we're getting to the point where we're like, I've seen enough. Let's make sure we put some safeguards in place. And that's what we got recently with the AI Act. Now, before that, there was the AI Pact. It was what would be the regulatory framework of the Artificial Intelligence Act. And it was just more voluntary that the companies could come forward and say, hey, we're going to start adhering to these things because we also agree that there are dangers to it. I'm usually someone that is kind of refrained from wanting to put more regulations, more laws in place. I think as adults, we should hopefully have enough common sense to police ourselves. That's kind of wishful thinking, especially with what we could see with artificial intelligence. One of the books that kind of freaked me out was Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, just kind of teetering on the science fiction of what the eventuality of artificial intelligence can do versus kind of the more near-term realism of what harm we could see. And surprisingly, and I say surprising because maybe I don't put enough faith in regulatory bodies or politicians in general to put a solid framework in place, that there's some good foundational aspects to this that I would like to see. Like here is the blueprint or the Bill of Rights for AI, the AI blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights here in the United States. Not something that you have to adhere to, just something that would be, kind of nice, kind of like the AI Pact was before now. And it's all against anti-discriminatory safety, the well-being of both personal, mentally, everything. And that's what we want to assess. We don't want artificial intelligence running rampant and controlling our lives. And when you think of why a regulation gets put in place, there first off has to be some sort of history behind it. We have to be seeing something where you're like, you know what, we need to take a step back, take a pause, evaluate what the potential dangers are or what the dangers have been, and then put some sort of framework in place. That way we aren't harmed ourselves. One of the things that kind of stood out with this and the history of it was kind of like the social credit score in a place like China, where you're kind of assessed on your overall, your literal credit score, your violations against the community or against laws, regulations, and assessing you and where you stand within the country based on that. And that could be incredibly dangerous. We don't want people scored in that way. And artificial intelligence is a modal to put something like that in place. So that's kind of some history in the protection of that. Also, whatever that the subject matter experts that come forward, write briefs and put things in place. They're like, hey, this is potential harms be put in place. Again, my last episode of the podcast, I was talking about specifically the IBM patent, and we went over some Gallup poll studies that a lot of people just have a distrust in AI because, well, if you don't understand something, the ignorance can make you distrust something. But also, it's really difficult if you're not someone who's competent in reading the code or understanding how artificial intelligence systems work to really understand how they're outputting the data and coming up with things. It's kind of scary. So European Parliament, again, 523 to 46 vote, which is incredibly outstanding as far as what could be considered anything bipartisan, So let's actually talk about what this AI Act is. So the proposed rules will, and I'm reading, if you're listening, I'm reading directly from the European Union website, address risks specifically created by AI applications, prohibit AI practices that pose unacceptable risks, determine a list of high-risk applications. This is really where the regulatory framework is focused in. Set clear requirements for AI systems for high-risk applications. Define specific obligations to deployers and providers of high-risk AI applications. Require a conformity assessment before a given AI system is put into service or placed on the market. put enforcement in place after a given AI system is placed into the market, establish a governance structure at European and national level. And then they have a pyramid here showing that unacceptable risk, high risk is really where the focus is, limited risk, AI systems with specific transparency obligations, and then there's minimal risk ones that they're not necessarily focused in. And if you look in here, what high risk, critical infrastructures, educational, vocational training, again, it's a lot of stuff like migration, asylum, and border control management that can be somewhat discriminatory in nature, and that's not what they want out of an artificial intelligence system. And then subject to strict obligations, how much transparency, how much risk is posed, and then having to continually publish results as far as how the AI system is performing. So there is about minimal no risk, allows the free use of minimal risk AI, and then has a framework in there. When you put laws in place, there is the history that we discussed prior, the theory of how it should be executed upon, and then the actual enforcement of it, whether it's adjudicated or whatnot. That's what I'm going to be curious about, the adjudication of violations within the AI Act. And from what I've seen, it can vary from a slap on the wrist to millions of dollars in violations, and how that's determined, who's actually looking to see how the sausage is made in terms of the artificial intelligence model. That isn't necessarily clear to me. I don't know how that's going to be put into play. I do have some theories. So my background in patent law, I was able to go sit in on some more federal cases of patent law that was put in front of a judge. And I actually spoke to a federal judge and asked him, what are your favorite cases that you've ever been a part of? And a couple of them that I've asked are patent cases, because subject matter experts have to be flown in, like brilliant, like professor level, PhD level, and they have to actually teach the judge so he can be competent and actually given the proper ruling if it's like something like a patent infringement case on like a biology patent, for example. And so they're pretty much being paid to learn, which is incredibly fascinating. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some aspect of that put into the enforcement of artificial intelligence violations, because again, like it's still brand new. There are people like even myself that are educating myself on specifically building out these AI models. But it is incredibly fascinating to see that a actual regulation is being passed. And we'll see here in the United States, we've got a lot of different underlying things that kind of motivate politicians one way or another. So we'll see if something like this blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights would also follow suit like the AI Pact did for the EU.